Red Balloon Rock Talk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This is episode 3. We're gonna take a little deviation from what we were talking about last week, in our idea of doing a different show. We're gonna push that to the next one. Anyway, today happens to be a very special day, so this is why we're kind of revamping things. It's the 25th anniversary of Jerry Garcia's passing, and we thought we'd just pay a little bit of a tribute to Jerry Garcia, what he meant to us and to the music world a little bit. And basically, we're just going to recount our very first experiences with Jerry, meaning our first shows. So everybody who's seen the Dead understands probably what we're about ready to talk about. It's our experience, it's the parking lot, it's then going into the venue and checking out all the crazy stuff happening during the show, you know, in between the first and second set, what's happening with drum space, etc. The quality of Jerry playing, you know, just kind of things like that, and just we'll kind of tie it together with some other things at the end with, you know, some tribute stuff. So anyhow,
And what I'm
this
going
is
to
kind of
do
our show today.
in the comments below or in the description below, I'll have a link to the archives that are on the web that you can go and actually listen. They have pretty much every show they've ever performed archived that you can listen to. And so
Yeah,
I'll have
that's
that link.
awesome. It's great that we have this technology today. You know, I was thinking back, you know, back in the day when I was in high school and we were sitting here trading tapes and, oh, I got the best tape ever. And you run home and you're listening to it, or you got a DAT version, which is even better. And
Yep.
so today's technology is just amazing with the digital. It's just the
And in
phenomenal
fact,
quality
what I
that you have
discovered
today.
on
So,
that archive is that not only do they have people's tapes and stuff that they recorded from their taping area, but they actually have some recordings that came directly from their mixing boards. So
oh, yeah.
there's some really clear recordings going on.
Good. All right. Well, let's get into the show today. I'm thinking I'll start here with one of the one of the cool things that I keep around. And this is my first Dead show ticket stub, which I was quite impressed I could find. And I was trying to remember back what what year, first off, that was. I was not quite sure whether it was 85 or 86 that I first saw the Dead, but it turns out the ticket stub doesn't lie. It was March 24th, Philadelphia Spectrum. Um, and that was in 1986. And if you've never seen a show at the Spectrum, wow, the energy is amazing at the Spectrum. It doesn't exist anymore, but I could just tell you I've seen a lot of shows there, and wow, awesome. The parking lot vibe is really killer, and you know, just a phenomenal thing. So uh, I'll get right into the show. Basically, what I want to do is first just kind of give you the lineup, because then I can base my conversation on that. So in the first set, now imagine your first show, and this is the set list. So we have Alabama Getaway, In the Greatest Story, Dire Wolf, Red Rooster, Brown Eyed Woman, My Brother Esau, Ramble on Rose, El Paso, and then finishing it off with Box of Rain and Phil Lesh. All right. So that's a killer first set. And might I say that Jerry was playing exceptionally well at this point, and it shows up in some of the live. You can actually check out on YouTube some videos that are available from this particular show. You'll understand what I'm saying. He was lean and mean back at that time, and his picking was amazing. So anyway, we go into the second set, um, and that is Mississippi Half Step, then into Man Smart, Woman Smarter, to High Time, and then one of my all-time favorites, Lost Sailor, into Circumstance, then Drum Space, Morning Dew, and then the show ender for the encore in the Midnight Hour. All right, so if you think about that set list for just a minute, it's insane. All the incredible music. It's such a range of their diversity right there in that whole show. you're looking at just the mellow into the psychedelia sort of jazzy influences, and then the drum spaces at that time. Mickey was on stage, so you had two drum sets going on at the same time, so you had this amazing drumming going on for drums. And the spectrum, the way it was set up, I think just the sound, and especially when you were up in the upper levels, it just moved around in such a way, it kind of moved you in and out of your seat if you were sitting, which I don't know anybody who did, but anyway, you felt that vibe and that energy level, and it was pretty amazing just to be in that presence. So, I remember walking into the Spectrum, and the anticipation of seeing the Dead. You're looking at all the album covers and anything that you could find in print at the time. It was just like, okay, what is it really like? And so I remember as soon as the band started playing, and you hear that first note, and it was magic happening for me. And a lot of Deadheads out there, they always talk about a religious experience going to a show in many different ways. And I think that's so true. Music affects everybody in such a way, but the Dead, Jerry's playing was so instrumental, so unique, that there's no one out there who can play like Jerry. I mean, his banjo influence from so early on, it is prevalent throughout everything he touches in music. And where do you go from here? It's just like, Jerry had such a mastery of the guitar. It was so fluid. And even if he wasn't playing the greatest, although this show is amazing, the licks, there were always licks that you would hear. They were like, oh, that's something different. That's new. It was never the same thing twice. And I think that is the beautiful part about how Jerry played. And I owe that to the idea of all the musicians that influenced him, that influenced all the guys in the band. But just all the side projects, Jerry Band and Merrill Saunders with Jerry, he played with everybody, and everyone liked playing with Jerry. He was just an easygoing guy to get along with. I've never met him myself, but through all the interviews, that's exactly what you would expect. He's just that kind of easygoing person, and you pick up that vibe when you're watching him on stage.
Describing his style of playing, it was not a pyrotechnic style. It was not flashy.
Yeah.
It was very.
And you have to think about too. In 1986, this is at the height of hair bands and metal, and you had glam rock, infiltrating the airwaves, and then you have this other genre coming up, and the band was just becoming megalithic, even though they already were, but there was a whole resurgence, and so, yeah.
Very melodic style of playing. And I read something actually just the other day that, he was so not wanting to be the leader that he would not say anything about a direction or try to influence a direction in an improv, and that truly made their improvisational approach quite unique. That there wasn't a central figure that was demanding this is the way we need to go.
I think that's very true. I mean, you hear it in all the lives. I mean, everything that's live, they jive so well on stage. They're always just listening for little cues and pickups, and when you play with somebody for so long, you automatically almost sense it and feel what's happening around you, and it is very evident. When they're on, they're on, and especially when Jerry just brings you up to this incredible peak, and then it gently brings you down.
Yep.
So if in my research for this show, and I was talking about this concert here, the Satan Circumstance, there is this peaking moment, and Jerry just brings you, and it's nothing spectacular, but there's just something about the guitar, there's something about the engineering of the sound. It's just crazy, and the fans react to it. That's the coolest part, is you, and that's that spiritual thing I was just referencing just a little bit
Yeah.
ago. It's just that high you get from hearing the music and it lifting you and making you feel so good and like, wow, I'm so glad I am here experiencing this right now. And it just makes you want to come back and do more. And that's why people follow the dead. And it's that experience. So how about your first experience? What was
So
your
my first experience was actually in 1990. And let me just bring up my thing here. So I was not a. Hang on a second. There we go. So I came to the Dead a little bit later in my life. I was not a Dead fan through high school and actually through a lot of college. A lot of my friends were into them. Obviously, you were into them, so uh, I was certainly very aware. I certainly loved the artwork and all that. And there were things about the Dead that had always kind of intrigued me, but not enough to kind of uh,
You were
explore
too
that.
busy listening to Radiohead.
Well, I was in other things, but but it was not something that was like I never completely said never, but it was not something that I pursued. So anyway, in 1990, a dear friend of mine who I had not been in touch with for quite a while, she had gotten in touch with me saying she was going to be in town, and to go to the Dead show, and if I would like to go, um, and I said sure. I'd love to take in the experience. And so my first experience was at the Cap Center, just outside of DC, and which is much like the Spectrum. Very much like the Spectrum, just in the DC area. And again, it no longer exists. But so the Cap Center, it was March 15th of 1990, and at the time I was at the University of Maryland working on a doctoral degree, and so I had classes all day, and then I went and I met up with her at the show. I drove out myself, and so I was kind of in not Dead show clothes. I was more in college clothes. So people were kind of more avoiding me than embracing me.
There's this crazy dude out here in the
Yeah,
parking lot.
they
You don't
weren't sure if
belong
I was
here.
undercover or not. But anyway, so um, I took in some of the parking lot scene, which it was just fascinating to me. I was really soaking it in. Met up with her. We went to the show, and we sat up in on the side, not too far from the stage, but I had an awesome view of the floor of the arena where a bulk of the audience was. And the first few notes the Dead started playing. Uh, just watching the Sea of Humanity dance in the way that they dance, to move
Yeah.
the way they move. I will never forget that image.
Yeah.
And it was.
You
It
can't
also
help
happened
but
to,
move. It gets your body going.
yeah.
It's just
Well, and it also happened to be Phil.
if you can sit still during a live
Yeah. Well,
show, all
I
the
mean,
power to you. I really honestly don't know how that's
yeah. I
possible.
mean, I was drawn in right away. It also happened to be Phil Lesh's 50th birthday, so they were celebrating his
Oh
birthday
yeah.
that night. But on that, and again, so my experience was more from the the experience of just being there. I was not waiting to hear any specific song, although I knew
Right.
about drums in space, and that ended up being, and that still remains to be my favorite part of a Dead show. Um, you know, the funny thing is, for my coming to the Dead late, I ended up going to 5 shows before Jerry passed. And in fact, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, but the very last show that I went to was with you, and it was at
Yep.
JFK Stadium, and it was just month and a half prior to his passing. But so anyway, at the '90s show, I guess some of the tunes that people might know were China Cat, Sunflower, Samson and Delilah, Terrapin Station, Wharf Rat, not Fade Away. Those were some of the tunes that they played that night.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's
I
a
just
killer
remember
show.
that I
I
can't,
love Warfrat.
man, that was, I've been to other rock shows, but that was definitely by far the most unique experience I had at a rock show. And and I knew if I had the chance to go again, which I ended up doing, that I would definitely do it again. So,
Mhm.
but I think
You
it.
got on the bus, huh?
What's that?
I said you got on the Grateful Dead bus.
Yeah. Well, and I was
Yeah.
telling you before we started recording that I went on this website, where where they have all these concerts, and I listened. I was able to find that concert in 1990, and then I listened to the some of the concert that we went to in '95. And because I had been reading, because to be quite honest, in 1995, I was not aware of how bad of shape Jerry was in terms of his
Yeah.
health. And for us, it was just another dead moment, dead experience. And but for him, he was nearing the end of his life, and I think,
Yeah.
and based on what I've been seeing and so on, many in the band kind of had that in their minds that that was the case. It turned out to be a very odd tour, but and so I listened to what I experienced in 1990 and to what we experienced in 95. And there's definitely a difference in energy. There's definitely a difference in Jerry's productivity. His voice
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
gone on the '95 show, and some people have said they should never have gone out, and maybe Jerry would still be around had they not pushed to taking that last tour. But
Yeah, but Jerry, I mean, he suffered a heart attack, and a lot of that was because of the heroin, and
well,
the
and
drugs just have
he
caught up, and plus the diabetes
yeah,
never, it
he was
doesn't
way
help at
overweight,
all.
and
So
they were talking about how it was difficult for him to even walk up the stairs to get on the stage.
oh yeah,
He
yeah,
was
yeah,
he was out of it
he
on
had
a
his
couple of the
troubles.
concerts. They ended up canceling one concert because of some gate crashers the night before, and the police said they weren't going to
Yeah.
do anything about it.
Sadly, in 1990, that's when the Dead started attracting just wannabes. And older Deadheads will probably agree with what I'm saying. There was just this weird cutoff around 89, 90, where the parking lot scene was just really filled with people, trying to make a profit. And it wasn't about the music. It wasn't about the love, this the camaraderie. It wasn't anything like that. It was a very different vibe, and I don't know really how to attribute that. I mean, I've talked a lot to my friends about this, in the past, and you try to figure out what happened. It's like it kind of almost made going to a show unenjoyable if that's possible. But when you are watching people who really don't understand why you're there, they're just there to get away from mom and dad. There was a really young crowd, and that changed the perspective of everything. And it kind of turned a lot of people off. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, I'm not going to go on tour next year," and it's just too much hassle. And I understand that. And I agree with a lot of that. I took a little bit of a hiatus myself. I mean, I hit some spots here and there, but for the most part, I got really perturbed about just those things, about the parking lot scene. What was happening inside. People were just like, it was more, you know, hey, why are you touching me, kind of thing. Get away. It wasn't like, hey, oh, I'm sorry. Just
Yeah.
a very different vibe. And I think as far as Jerry's concerned, he, like you said earlier, like he never wanted to be the leader of the band, and everyone always just says Jerry is the leader of the band. He is the band, and I think as we celebrate 25 years of, I don't know if it was celebrate, but we just honor the anniversary of this date. Um, Jerry influenced everybody. He influenced his own band. He influenced the people that he played with in side gigs. He influenced his audience, and people who were naysayers, when they finally heard him play, it's like, oh, I had it all wrong. I didn't know. And
Well,
that's the
that's the
best
thing.
part. I love that part of it.
I mean, as I've gotten older and my tastes have expanded a lot. It's been fun to explore more in depth what they did. And so, do you remember where you were when you heard about Jerry's death?
I was in Cozumel, Mexico, celebrating my honeymoon. I had just gotten married a few days before, and it was quite a shock to say the least.
Yeah, and even though I
You
was
know,
not, what you would consider to be a deadhead or a dead fan to the extreme, I remember, I read about it or heard it on the news, and it struck me. It was kind of like when David Bowie died. It was one of those
very
like
surreal.
it was a very surreal moment, and because I sensed that the end of an era was coming to.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. I think that's what I think what you're saying is exactly right. What I was just talking about the changeover in the '90s where the vibes shifted, and I think that's exactly what it was. It was like an era coming to a close, and no one really wanted it to come to a close. And since his passing and all the versions of the band, the Dead, the Further, Dead and Company, they're they're redoing the music and they're bringing back that really positive vibe again. And I think there had to be that cut off, if you will. They gave time. The
Well,
band
I
members
think it
gave
had gotten
time
so.
for mourning.
I think it had gotten so big and so out of control that it took something like that to happen to again kind of remind us of what it was, and
Hmm.
and it took some time to recalibrate. I think all the band members had to recalibrate and kind of
Yeah, for
figure
sure.
out, what is the legacy? How do we honor that legacy? How do we honor what this had been? And so I think that's an important thing to look at. Um,
Yeah, and John Mayer is doing a phenomenal job right now with Dead and Company. I was just listening to an interview with him not long ago, and he's very humble about it. And he's like, I'm paraphrasing what he was saying here, but he said, stepping in, I didn't do a whole lot of preparation to get ready to and understand the band. And all I just wanted to do was go in and not mess up. And he said after playing for over a year and being in the crowd and understanding the music, it's not just playing the music note for note the way it should be played. It was that improvisation, that was that flexibility that Jerry allowed consistently,
yeah.
which made it didn't matter whether you played a song 185 times or 495 times. Yeah, you're going to have a couple of bad shows. It's going to sound like crap every once in a while, but the bulk of it was always just pure genius because there was that audible allowance of free whatever I want to play, I'm playing. And on that, let me just say really quickly here because I have to bring this up. Charles Lloyd, in the Dead Circles, that's a name that you don't really hear. Charles Lloyd was a jazz musician that hung out with Jerry in the early days in the Dead. And, in 73, 74, they started having this shift into their jazz. And the Charles Lloyd Band, would play basically at the same times and the same venues. And they got to just hang out with all the time. And so they were constantly hearing this improvisational jazz and they loved it, you know what I mean? And even Deadheads were starting to listen to it, because of the venues set up the way it was. And so there are transitional moments in different Dead songs that you hear that jazziness that came from Charles Lloyd, and he's so prolific. And it was just a great interview. I believe it was David Gans who was interviewing him back in July. They kind of cut together something because this came off the Golden Road. Anyway, the interview was just phenomenal, and it was really insightful to hear how Jerry really loved listening to Charles Lloyd and that friendship and that they had and the respect. And if you don't listen to any Charles Lloyd, go out and listen to some Charles Lloyd because it's phenomenal. It's really awesome.
Well, and
With that too,
I also saw that he Jerry was had a deep uh, appreciation for John Coltrane. Uh,
yes, I was going to bring that up too. Miles
yeah,
Davis, and
So
you know,
definitely.
even like, go ahead.
No, I mean he's been influenced by the jazz greats, and not just bringing
Yeah,
in jazz elements, but the approach to improvisation, which
yeah,
doesn't
and
have to.
Bobby Weir too is also really loved those guys as well. And then you had Branford Marsalis playing, on shows, and he would come in off of a plane and just step right in and not rehearse and just go right into it. And that's sheer respect, bringing somebody like Branford Marsalis into a stadium of young kids who've never seen him potentially or even heard him, and he just blends right in as if it was a natural thing. And
Well, and he
it's
had Bruce
wonderful when,
Hornsby on for many of the last shows.
yeah, yeah, he would
So,
come in and step in after,
some,
and oh, hey, look at that, that phone is ringing. Hey, all right, can't edit that out, can we? Anyway, but yeah, I just wanted to bring up, a few important names associated with Jerry, and one of those is David Grisman, um, contemporary folk rock, because you have to throw that into the mix. And little did you probably know that Joan Baez was probably one of Jerry's most favorite artists.
hmm, I did not know.
Yeah, I was it's something that you would have, if you're thinking about we were talking about favorite albums and things, one of our episodes. So it's like, if you look at Jerry's favorite albums, you'll see a lot of John Baez in there, which really caught me off guard. But in the same sense, it really doesn't, because of the folk influence and bluegrass, obviously. And when we're talking about bluegrass, you're talking about John Kahn, you're talking about Grissom, and you know that's a really important element. And Jerry would sit down and play with anybody if they had an instrument, I think.
Oh yeah,
Kazoo, tambourine. If he
yep,
wanted to make music, I think he would just be, okay, let's do this.
yeah,
And it was just pure fun. So
yeah,
anyway, that's what we have, I think, unless you want to follow
yeah.
up on
No,
something.
I think you know we would love to hear comments of your experiences with the Grateful Dead, with Jerry Garcia. Um,
Especially your first show, because
what,
that's the most
yeah, what your
impactful. That's
show experience was
when you
like,
really are hit with it. Yeah.
and
But all right.
and I'd be curious to get people's takes on how they think the Dead and Jerry Garcia influenced popular music. Um, what was, is music to, is there anything going on now that um, that would have influences or have been
Yeah.
influenced by something like the Grateful Dead? Whether it's from an improvisational point of view or it's the incorporating multiple types of music, the roots music, just even the playing style of Jerry, which is truly unique. I mean, you really can never replicate that, but
Exactly.
it's
Yeah. That's what's so special there.
I think it's an interesting thought experiment, if you will. Um,
For sure.
what their true legacy is to American popular music, or even world. So
Well, I believe there'll be one of those bands that will stand the test of time, and they've already done just so. And there's so many offshoot bands that play the Dead music regularly, that keep it alive. And as long as young musicians keep exploring that and they keep wanting to play that music, changing it a little bit here and there, this kind of goes against everything I stand for in music. But I think right from the get-go, that is what the Dead is all about, this constantly transforming themselves. Over the years, they transformed into different things, and they were never afraid to play anything different. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's not,
yep,
oh, here we go, it's the same thing and it sounds just like the album every single time they go and play it. But
yep,
that's not the case.
yep,
And at any rate, I think next week we'll get into some of that a little bit. I think
yeah,
it's partly just talking about what makes rock rock, and
exactly.
we'll talk about the different influences, what we define it as, maybe how you define it, we're always looking to see how other people kind of, view that definition of what rock and roll is, and where do we go from there. So anyway, that's the show. Hope you like it. Hit the comment button, add something fun for us to read.
Hit the
Hit the like button, subscribe. Yeah, click, hit that subscribe button.
Like
all
button.
right.
Yep.
And for sure, always on the like button. And I hope you like this topic today. Again, we're trying to just kind of go with the flow here today, being what the day was. So hope you enjoyed. Anyway, everyone have a great evening and talk soon.
See you next time.